Professor. It's good to see you again. And nowadays, our roads intersect many times. How do you do, sir?
Glad to be back. I'm glad to be here.
The last part of the job is make everything what we have read is turned to numbers. So in this reason, in that ground, I made a valuation that is compatible with narrative and numbers.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't mind, I would like to show it to you in 10 minutes. Why did I do that and what were the problems? So then I would be happy for your feedback if my narrative or numbers.
Okay.
But before we start introducing things, I'd like to say in this presentation, you will find 5 parts. First part is why did I do that, this valuation, and how did I create a narrative? And how did I turn the narrative to numbers? These are the core of the issue. And then we will see the market feedback. How did this stock move in the market? Then last sentence is the future planning. But before that, I should say that neither me or Professor make this for financial purposes, no sponsorship, nothing, just for educational purposes. So be aware of your own risk. When I was translating narrative and numbers, I was amazed with the companies that was in, from Amazon to Apple and Ferrari to Uber. There were different types of companies. Some of them were young growth companies, some of them were major companies. And from every valuation, I have learned plenty of things. And I was a little bit upset. Why don't we have any Turkish company in this Turkish edition? So before embarking on the project to translate it, I made with my own initiative evaluation. But then the question was, which company to value? Because IFRS standards are different, and it is not in Turkey for all companies required. So I have to choose a company that is publicly listed, and there are problems in the application because classical system and IFRS compatible companies don't give the same numbers. So I made some adjustments, but these are not the issue. So I have decided to value Soda. It was before the merger, a part of the, it was separate company from ŞİŞECAM. So I was already had stocks in this company, and the reason is risk and return. It was based on liquidity ratios, was a solid company for me, and financial leverage show that that was a low risk company with their own funds. And the return side, profitability was pretty satisfactory for me. And therefore, I was feeling like when I heard the ŞİŞECAM merger, it was like a reunion of Germany to me. So it will be a burden on Soda for this merger, but I kept the process following. So in my blog, I have reported every development during the merger in English. And the CEO reported after the merger that this is in Turkish history, the largest merger. So that was also an important issue. And Soda was globally before merger, 4th in the Europe and 8th in the globally in this chemical production, which is the raw material of glass industry. So with the merger, they would like to enhance the market. They would like to grow more. And there was an emphasis on global competitiveness. So in this global competitiveness was as core of the merger. I'll skip these parts, but that exactly explains what I was telling. They would like to make the structure simple, and growth and operating efficiency was the highlighted points in the merger story. Therefore, I had points on that. So in the second part, I have created my own narrative separate from the CEOs or other people's narratives. So let's have a look. The recent growth rates for the sales of the company was around 21%. And this 20% growth was pretty high. And if they would like to be a European company, that rate should approach the European peers. So in the 5th year, I decreased it to 16, and at the 10th year, it would be an 8% growth. But the question here was, where do the growth comes from? So in the following slides, I'll explain the sales and the break-evens. So market share should also increase if they would like to be globally competitive and if they would like to make mergers with other companies, organic or inorganic, that means they had to increase their market share. So growth can be reasoned. And when it comes to operating expenses, this is a little bit tricky part, because operating expenses can go down with the efficiency, but it can also increase due to new markets, new advertisements. So we will see the break-evens. But I kept the operating margin at 15%. And last but not least, this is a capital-intensive industry. So if they would like to grow, my narrative says that reinvestment rates should also be high. We will see that too. So that's the slide I was mentioning. Sales increased in the last 10 years. That's what I had checked in the last 10 years. These are last 12 months. And with the sales, we see that red line shows domestic and blue line is international, both increased. But in the below, you are seeing the percentage of this sales break-even. And as we see, the breakdown of the sales show us that it's becoming more international. It's already there. It's before the merger story. So with the merger, they would like to make it higher. So I have checked the annual reports. In the annual reports, last 5 years also proves that this 40% rate for the domestic market and the rest 60% is international. So that can be up to 70%, I think. But the second question is, this growth in the Turkish side is going together with the inflation rate. So as the inflation increases, sales look like increased, but in real terms, it might not be like that. The compound growth rate that I have calculated in this period was 17.66%. Then the second part of the story, the operating margins. For the revenues, we have seen that cost of sales also increased in the same period, and gross profit also increased. What was interesting to me, the breakdown of the operating expenses. Costs of sales with general administrative expenses with the blue line decreases even where before the merger, and it might go a little bit further down. But what we are seeing, they are making more expense to make more sales. The marketing expenses are increasing, and it should increase more if they would like to have new markets. So these are the margins, and these are the margins from the annual report. And we are seeing here there are 5 sectors that the company is working on. This glassware, chemicals, and glass packing are the core issues. And flat glass is now in 2 parts, with auto glass and architectural glass. And pay attention that operating margins are falling there, although the sales increase. And this is the return on equity. And as time is always against us, now I would like to make this narrative in numbers. So let's have a see, how do these numbers fit with these narratives? In the valuation first, I have used the standard Excel charts that I used for the previous valuations, which is not compatible with the book. But this gives us that weighted average cost of capital was 19.59. And I should say in this point, as the company is a little bit more European than Turkish companies, this is lower rate compared to other countries. And the reason for that is equity risk premium is lower as the company has more sales in Europe. To be precise, 34% of the sales are in Europe. And then what we see here is the growth rate in the stable growth on the right-hand corner up. You'll see it's 8%. That's my 10th year growth rate. And in the 5th year, it will be 16. So cost of capital decreases to 12%, which I think that the company will be more European, both in terms of growth and sales and the cost of capital. And the final value on the left side of the diagram, you see 11.89. This is the value per share that I have calculated after various operations. And the current price of the shares at the time that I made this valuation, which is July 13, 2021, was 7.55. These are all in nominal terms in Turkish lira, and these are from the first quarter of 2021. So that means the stock was 36.49% undervalued according to my valuations. Then I transferred this Excel worksheet to compatible format that take place in narrative and numbers. So these are basically the same, just the appearance are different. And we see the final result again as the same. I'll come back to this point later on, but Board of Directors has also made an announcement on 26th of February that they will make share buybacks. Now we just move forward. That's the part that I'm talking, market feedback. That was my valuation. And let's see how did market reacted. On the left-hand side, you are seeing that January 17th, 2020 was the first time I bought Soda shares. It was 5.10. Then at the end of the year, the merger announcement came at October 1st. It's completed actually. Then I made my first valuation in the 2021. And the purple line again shows that Board of Directors announced the buyback decision. As it was compatible with my ideas, I did more buying and more buying, just because valuing a company for my principles should be supported with the action. Therefore, I did this. And these are the official papers for the buyback and more. And finally, future planning. That was my presentation with narrative and numbers. I would be happy any feedbacks from the professor. And I should say that I was a little bit and white Bill Gurley narrative in the book with Uber. So if it would be, the time shows that in the future, my Şişe evaluation pace, I would be happy to see that in the both Turkish and English editions. Thank you very much for your patience and feedbacks.
Thank you, Ergun. It's as you went through the story and you talked about how you picked it. I mean, let's go back to the start. You said you picked it because you owned it in your portfolios. At least Soda was in your portfolio before.
Exactly. It was one of the great companies, and you have already valued Arçelik and Turkish Airlines. So I did have not much.
No, when you say great, how do you come to that conclusion? Is it from somebody else's survey of the company? Is it your own perception of the company? So, no, and what made it great to you? I mean, obviously, you looked at the company before you did this valuation. You looked at it in prior years. So, what is it about this company that you like so much?
The risks were low to me because it was a solid company on the risk basis, liquidity ratios, current ratio, asset ratio. So they had money and they had low risk and they didn't have so much debt and they were growing with their own equity. So owners' equity was increasing in time. So that was financially stable to me on the first side. Risk should be low and return should be high. So return.
But remember, to look at those numbers, something drew your attention because those are not numbers that you just run into by accident. So what made you first look at this company? Was it the fact that it was doing well and other people were making money? I'm trying to go back to the very start of when this company showed up on your radar. Nobody computes ratios on companies arbitrarily, right? You pick a company because something drew your attention to the company. I'm trying to find out what the original force was that drew your attention to the company.
I was firstly opened account in Turkey. It was 2019. And then I saw that I need a company that generates cash in foreign exchange and that is a good competitiveness and it has connections in the Europe and abroad. So that was I was looking for. So
in other words, your criteria already led you to a story because your criteria required that you be in foreign markets, that you have. So what I'm saying is your story was already in a sense pre-written before you actually wrote the story, right? And that's not a bad thing. It is the nature of the process. fact, the first thing I would encourage people to do when they tell stories about companies is be open about why you came up with the story. Nobody sits down. So it's not like an author who sits down with a blank, book and starts writing. You actually have the plot laid out and you're filling in the lines. And in this case, it happened that the lines felt pretty close to what you thought the plot was going to be. But were there any surprises as you started filling the story where you actually, as you started telling a story, you realized that the script was not going the way you expected it to?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I was a little upset with the merger news, actually.
So did the merger change your story in any way? What was your first reaction to the merger? Were you?
My first reaction was, again, the same with the reason. The risks were higher in the other companies. They were not so solid, in my opinion. So they were not generating so good cash as with Soda. So I thought that's a pity for Soda. If it would be alone, I wouldn't buy the other shares, just the Soda. But as a merger, it's a package. I have to take all of them or leave the Soda. Then I decided, okay, I'll keep the Soda anyway.
But that seems like a very passive way to view the merger, because you're not saying the merger makes you better. You're saying I still like Soda, it's merged, but I'm going to. So, but by itself, did the merger change your story in any way? Because mergers can change stories, because clearly the company did this for a reason. What do you think the reason was? Because the company is telling the story too, right? Mm-hmm. They're telling their own story. And when you do a merger, you're basically saying, I am changing my story for good reasons, bad reasons. So what do you think the company's motive was when it did the acquisition? What part of the story were they trying to change?
There's pros and cons. Pros was, I was thinking they might do cost efficiency together and with one structure, managerial decisions can come quicker and faster and better, I thought. So they might have cost efficiency in other grounds with the raw materials and sales and logistics.
So from the vertical integration, right? So basically there's cost efficiency because you control the supply chain up and down.
Exactly.
And how will that play out? Are they planning to cut their prices to compete more, increase their margins? So let's say the story is true that they will cut costs. Mm-hmm. Where is it going to show up? Is it going to show up as higher profitability or higher growth? Because they could do either, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But so what do you think the extension of that story was? Were they doing this because they wanted to make more money selling the same number of items? Or is it because they wanted to sell more by cutting the price at which they sell stuff?
I think the second looks better in their story, because they say we will grow with excellence. So
but have they done that? So have you seen them cut prices since they did this? I mean, you can tell whatever you want, but ultimately your actions tell more about what you're doing. Have they actually cut prices since they did this?
I don't see any price cut, but I see an improvement in profit margin. So they are increasing costs, but they're also increasing sales.
Well, that's almost a given, right? If you cut your cost and your price stays the same, the margins will go up. But if you're not cutting your price, why would people buy more of your product? So where's the extra growth coming from?
It looks like new markets and inorganic growth. But at the moment, what I see is sales are increasing and profits are increasing. But I'm not sure.
But what's causing that growth? Where are they growing? I mean, are they the largest player in Turkey already?
Yes, they are. And
so what market share do you think they have of the Turkish market?
I don't have an exact number, but more than 40% of
the dominant market share. So if they stayed in Turkey, if they'd never gone to Europe, their growth would then be tied pretty closely to how the Turkish market was growing. And given that glass is a fundamental material to consumer products, presumably at the same growth rate as the economy, right? I mean, in a sense, that's, since you're working in Turkish lira, presumably that number will be, what do you think a nominal growth rate for the Turkish economy is right now?
10 on 15, 10%.
15%. So that would be the growth rate you would get if you stay, and you're giving this company a growth rate higher than that. So that must mean implicitly in your story, they're expanding outside Turkey. And I think in your story, it's into Europe.
Mhm.
And there they compete against, and you said Russia?
That's true. Russia is also in a market there selling their products.
But which is the bigger one? I mean, is Russia a small portion? Is it West? So because that makes a big difference. Is Western Europe, Eastern Europe, or Russia? Which of those three is?
In my valuation, I took Russia and Turkey as emerging markets. So I gave their beta coefficients in the same way. And I did Europe and global in four.
But where's the growth coming from? Is it coming primarily from Russia? Or is it coming primarily from Western Europe?
In last 5 years, they were all growing. The percentage was same, but they were growing all in the same markets. For example, in Turkey, 5 years ago, it was 40% of sales. Now it's again 40%, but the 40% is higher. So they are making more sales.
And who are they competing against? Primarily European and Russian glass makers, global glass makers, Chinese glass makers. What's the competition look like?
That is so, but that was the sectors that I was mentioning in my presentation. They are now only a few of the companies, they have these four sectors in the one roof. So that's their advantage, what I think, because they are making architectural glass, auto glass. Normally in Europe, there's just auto glass companies, not auto glass company makes chemicals. So this is the edge that the ŞİŞECAM has. They has the raw material from soda, for example, merger, and they have the other architectural glass, auto glass, or houseware. So they are not competing with one company that I can point out. They are competing with many companies in different sectors.
And how do they win that competition? By charging lower prices, better quality? Why do customers pick them over the competition?
In the new market, I believe that they can cut the price for a while until they can gain the customers. But after that, it's not sustainable. That's why I dropped my growth rate from 21%.
And in Turkey, what makes them so dominant? Is it their quality? Is that because they're competing against other Turkish companies, presumably whose costs are similar to theirs, or do they have the same cost advantage within Turkey, or is it a quality advantage?
In Turkey, I would say, I'm not sure, I'm not an expert on this industry, but they are more like a monopoly. They don't have a competition, I would say. So in the operating margin, they can keep it high in Turkey with charging more prices if they want to.
You have a breakdown of margins by region? Is the margins higher in Turkey than they are in the rest? They give you enough information to be able to look at the margins by region?
That I fitted in my Excel with their reports. So it's for 34% was from Turkey. I think I should check the Excel. It was there already.
No, but 34% of the revenues were from, but the Prof, so 34% of the revenues are from Europe, 66% from Turkey, I think is what you said. What percentage of their profits right now from Turkey? Is it 80%? Is it 90%? Because the margins are higher in Turkey than in Europe. A higher percentage of the operating profits should be coming from Turkey, right?
It looks like that.
Now, going forward, I don't know, are there any macro things you need to worry about your story? Is that might help or hurt your story? Is, for instance, we clearly live in an age where people are worried about environmental questions. Plastic is clearly viewed as something. Is this helping the glass business as manufacturers increasingly shift away?
It's again pros and cons. For example, with this COVID, they say it and they made profit from that as far as I know. These are antibacterial glass they have produced. So it's a good thing. And the COVID, they made it a positive side. But on the other side, we know that supply chain problems is everywhere. So that might...
But see, let's get past COVID. Let's assume you're past COVID now. We're thinking macro long-term about the glass business, not even about this company. Are the macro forces lining up in your favor or against you?
In the midterm, in favor, I would say, but in the long run, it's a major industry and I don't know how can they improve that. So for a while, they can benefit from that. But in the long run, I don't see a prospect in so hefty profits. So that's...
And is the management of this company a big part of its success? Is it well regarded?
They do, yes.
Okay. Is it a family control company?
No, I don't think so. It's not.
Okay.
It's a institutional company.
Okay, so the managers are professional managers, right? So
And
basically they're,
each
to the
bank has
extent,
also a high share in this company. It's around around 50%, I would say. So it's one of the biggest institutions.
and are you worried at all about management transitions? How old is the CEO? Is there some concern about, or is this a management team? Are they not dependent upon a person as much?
I wouldn't say it's dependent person. It's a management team, but I would be lying if I said I read all the reports. I read most of them. I followed the process, and it's an institutionally solid merger. So not personal initiative.
And I don't know enough about the glass business to know about logistics, but if they want to grow in Western Europe, do they have to build their manufacturing facilities in Western Europe, or could they make them in Turkey and transport them?
They already have plants and manufacturing equipment and factories in Southeast Europe, as far as I know. So,
is that because the logistics of transporting glass is so you would really have to have a factory on the ground near to your revenues?
Yeah,
and those factories,
United States, as far as I know, with this soda ash and chemicals and chrome chemicals, they are number 4. So they want to be number 3. So they are making mergers with the US companies too, as far as I know.
Now, stick a tricky question. I mean, obviously, it's a Turkish company. How exposed is it to Turkish country risk? I mean, clearly, every Turkish company is, but to different degrees. How insulated or not insulated is this company from Turkish country risk?
For my valuation, I did it with the regions, and that reflects it's a lower risk compared to Turkish companies, as they have more European side. On the other scenario, in the future, I think that it will be easy for this company to borrow from abroad with the as it would be European company. So it would be lower for cost of capital. What I assume, the company will not have problems with insolvency. So they are always find resource.
But if they borrow in euros and they get the bulk of their profits still in Turkey.
At the moment, 60% comes from Europe and abroad.
No, but that's revenues, right? You don't pay debt out of revenues. It comes out of profits. And you just told me that the margins are much higher in Turkey than in the rest of Europe. So it'll be interesting to see what percentage of earnings comes from Turkey, because clearly, from the revenue perspective, they're less exposed, but earnings perspective. So it might, because they still have a mismatch. I mean, in the fundamental rule in corporate finance is your debt breakdown should reflect your revenue breakdown, at least your income breakdown. And clearly all of their debt, I mean, I'm just guessing here, given the history of Turkish companies, is not in lira. It's in euros or some other currency. So they've got a currency mismatch. Like every other Turkish company, they might be a little less exposed because they have foreign revenues in that same currency. So from that perspective, they're less exposed from that aspect of risk. But are there any other things, any of the other corporate benefits they get tied to the Turkish government that you have to worry about, where there is some macro shock to Turkey that those advantages might dissipate? Are there licenses within Turkey that they get from the government? No, it's a comparative marketplace.
I cannot give any guarantee, but in economic terms, I don't think that they will have problem, as I said.
So they don't have ties. So there's no strong government hand in this business. Mm-hmm. Unlike the telecom business, for instance, where government licenses and regulations can. So from that perspective, it's a Turkish play without too much macro Turkey risk. Are they an ambitious company? Do they want to get into other businesses? Should we be worrying about getting too ambitious?
I don't think so. They're already big and they would like to grow with what they do, not
so they're pretty focused in their growth rate. Now, so let's cut to the bottom line. You found the company to be undervalued. Did you add to your holdings? Just continue to hold? What did you do?
At the merger process, I kept watching with my present shares. After the merger, I increased with my valuation. After my valuation, when I found it's undervalued, I bought more shares. And when I saw company has also announced they are making share buybacks, I added more shares. Then the last part was not so logical. As the inflation comes, I should sell some of my shares. But I thought what could be a better investment instead of buying euros or dollars, I just bought more shares. With
Their pricing power? Are they the kind of company that raises, I mean, can you look at their history to see if they're able to raise prices at roughly the inflation rate, at least within Turkey?
They have pricing power, but
Okay.
in Europe, I'm not sure how strong this
That
power
doesn't matter, right? Because inflation is not a European problem, it's a Turkish problem. So
Not yet.
the only place where they have pricing, they need pricing power is within Turkey.
Yeah. That's true.
Now, one final question. As you track this company over time, I mean, you hold the company, you believe it's undervalued. If I said, which are the 2 metrics you will watch in earnings reports to get a sense of whether your story is holding, what are the 2 metrics in this company that you would most focus on?
I would definitely check operating margin. Do they keep it stable? And breakdown of operating margin gives me the costs. And the second metric, the return on equity would be probably. So do they earn with the owner's equity or they are getting more debt to grow? So that might be
measure organic versus inorganic reinvestment, how it's playing out. Okay. Sounds like you have a solid story. I mean, it's a company that I think you understand well enough, and it's not it's not one of those soaring young growth company stories. It's an established company with significant potential growth. I mean, it kind of brings home the point that just because you have an established company doesn't mean growth is dead. And I think it's given that its growth is coming from the rest of Europe, I think one of the things you would probably need to keep your eye on is that revenue breakdown geographically as you go through time. Because if that starts to tilt away from Europe into Eastern Europe or more towards Russia, it doesn't make it a worse company, it makes it a different company.
That's true.
And is there anything that can act as a catalyst on the price to move it towards value? Are there big investors buying shares in the company trying to, are the institutional investors who are adding to their holdings? Is it something that you see? If it's a prominent company, presumably there are equity research analysts putting out, is there anything on the horizon that you think of that could cause some kind, because you need the price to move towards your value to make money. Do you see anything in this company that could allow for that reassessment?
The only thing that holds me back to buy more shares or to increase my positions is the counter risk or the general condition in global economic risks. Otherwise, with the company, with the narrative and with the numbers, I'm comfortable, but I think I already have enough. So I would like to see more clear on the horizon, then I can buy even if it costs more. But first, I should see these economic terms both in Turkey and in global growth, which is problematic at the moment. But I should say that your questions are wonderful. I felt like takes more so it's I like this kind of questions, because if everybody, as you say, thinks in the same way, I think there's no point to further improve ourselves.
The one thing I would recommend is you talk to, because it's a B2B company. It's a company where it's not selling directly to consumers. It's selling to manufacturers, people who use glass. I would strongly encourage you to talk to a few of the customers, people who use glass, even in Turkey, and ask them questions about if they buy glass from this company, why do they pick the company? If they buy it from a competition, getting a sense of what the underlying business is critical here, because it might be a commodity business, right? Basically, you buy glass from the cheapest manufacturer. There is really no quality. I don't know. Maybe there's no quality difference. in which case your competitive advantage has to be lower cost. There's no brand name. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is a difference in quality across different glass manufacturers. And if so, what is it that makes them pick one company over the other? Because understanding why people buy a company's products or services or don't is critical to getting some clear thinking going on what does this company need to do to grow and add value over time. Now, do you do a pricing of the company? Does it look cheap or expensive relative to other Turkish companies, like PE ratios, just very simple metrics? What does it look like?
It looks like undervalued in that terms too, but the same risks are valid for other companies too. So I have also checked Arçelik in the same process, in the same period. I have also valued that too, and some other companies too. But what I find interesting with this ŞİŞECAM, it's a little bit, how to say, heavy company. It doesn't move strong. It moves slowly, but it doesn't fall so sharp either. So I don't know, is it good or bad, but that's the way the company moves.
Sounds good. Glad you gave me a chance to take a look at the valuation and ask you questions. So hopefully, people watching this will be able to take your valuation and change the numbers that they think don't fit or they disagree with and make it their own, because neither you nor I have a monopoly on the right story and the right valuation. It's a process. And I think the more we're willing to talk about the process, the healthier the discussion becomes.
Exactly what I want from this conversation. It's not, oh, it's undervalued or valued. It's make your own stories as you tell in your book, change the numbers and find your own valuations, and acting on that is up to you. But your questions were very valuable, Professor. Thank you very much, and hope to see you in the future editions.
Thank you. Take care.